Have you ever wondered why some changes feel impossible? Like you've done the inner work, but life still drags you back into old patterns. Like something invisible keeps pulling you toward versions of yourself you thought you already left behind. You try to rise, but the ground beneath you feels familiar in all the ways you wish it didn't. It's not that you're not trying, it's that the version of you trying to evolve is still tangled in a reality that no longer fits who you're becoming. And deep down, you know, you're not supposed to stay the same, because every time you try to stretch into a new identity, it feels like an old frequency pushing back, not with resistance, but with memories, with emotions, with attachments you never consciously chose but still hold on to like anchors. This video is about that tension, that in-between space where one version of you is dissolving, while the new version hasn't fully taken root. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The old you can't survive, the new reality you're stepping into. Not because it was bad, not because it was wrong, but because it was built for survival. And now, you're ready for creation. So if you've ever felt like you're stuck in a loop, like life keeps echoing a story you've outgrown, if you feel like a stranger in your own thoughts, like your soul is whispering while your body still clings to the old script, then stay with me. Because this isn't just a mindset shift, it's a frequency collapse, it's a timeline shedding, it's a rebirth, and it doesn't happen through logic, it happens through alignment. You might think you're moving forward because the calendar says so, because your goals changed, because your routines look more productive than they used to, but if your energy hasn't shifted, if your emotional default is still wired to the same survival loops, then all that progress is surface level. Because transformation isn't about how much you change externally, it's about how much you release internally. And here's the part most people miss. Your body doesn't track time. It tracks emotion. It tracks pattern. It tracks energy. So even if years have passed since the pain, if the emotion is still trapped in your nervous system, it's not the past, it's your present. And your subconscious isn't concerned with what you want, it's concerned with what feels safe. And to your subconscious, familiar equals safe. So you keep looping, not because you're not healing, but because you're still broadcasting from an outdated signal. You might be speaking affirmations, but your frequency is whispering survival. It's why you find yourself in situations that feel like déjà vu. Different person, same feeling, new city, same inner emptiness. You think you're evolving, but the architecture of your identity hasn't changed, and this isn't your fault. Most of us were never taught how to update our energetic blueprint. We were taught how to cope, how to manage, how to adapt, without asking why we're still carrying stories that were never ours to begin with. Let's get honest here. How many times have you repeated the same dynamic and called it a coincidence? How many times have you downsized your desires because pursuing them triggered old fears? How often have you told yourself, maybe this is just who I am, when deep down you knew that wasn't true, but the version of you that could break free felt too far away to reach? This is what it means to live from the past, not just mentally, but emotionally, energetically. You've been living inside a memory, reacting to life as if it's still dangerous to expand, still threatening to rest, still unsafe to be seen. You might have changed your goals, but have you changed what you believe you deserve? Have you questioned what your nervous system actually thinks success feels like? Because for some people, success feels like pressure. Love feels like risk. Peace feels like boredom. And your body will reject what doesn't feel safe, even if your soul is craving it. It's why things fall apart the moment they start to feel good. It's why you self-sabotage the second something starts working. Not because you're afraid of failure, but because you've never felt safe in thriving. Progress isn't about doing more. It's about feeling different in the same situations. It's about walking into the old environment and no longer matching its frequency. You'll know you're rebirthing when the things that once hooked you don't even move you anymore. When the chaos that used to feel like home now feels too loud to tolerate. When you stop chasing the things that once defined your worth and start feeling peace without needing a reason. That's not just healing, that's evolution. And it begins when you stop confusing movement with transformation. When you stop calling emotional survival just how I am. When you realize the old you isn't meant to lead you into the new reality. The old you was necessary, but the future you is waiting. Not in your mind, but in your frequency. There's a reason why you keep going back. Back to the relationship that drains you. Back to the job that numbs you. back to the thoughts that shrink you. And it's not because you're weak, it's because your nervous system has learned to feel safe in the familiar, even when the familiar hurts, even when it costs you joy, even when it costs you years. See, freedom sounds beautiful until you actually stand in front of it, because the moment you do, every version of you that had to survive without it rises up with questions. Who will I be without this struggle? What will I have to lose to gain that peace? Will I be safe if I stop hustling for love? These are not questions your mind asks out loud. They're embedded in your body. They live in the tightness in your chest, the tension in your jaw, the way your breath shortens when something good enters your life. And if you've ever had a moment where things finally started feeling light, but you sabotaged it, backed away from it, talked yourself out of it, it's not because you didn't want it, it's because it didn't match the internal setting your body had memorized as normal. For some people, chaos is normal. For others, neglect feels like home. And the moment you start experiencing something better, your body goes into alert. Not because it's wrong, but because it's unknown. That's what safety becomes when it's built in trauma. Not the absence of danger, but the presence of what you've already survived. You get used to disappointment, so anything else feels suspicious. You get used to being let down, so trust feels like a setup. You get used to waiting for the other shoe to drop, so peace feels like a trick. And this is the root of the loop. You attract what matches your inner reality, not because you're broken, but because your body is trying to protect you. It remembers the nights you were alone, the words that cut deeper than silence, the feeling of being too much and never enough at the same time. And so it learns, it adapts, it builds walls made of habits. It writes code into your nervous system, and you call that code personality. But personality is not identity, it's adaptation. And sometimes you have to unravel who you became to survive in order to become who you truly are. So if you're wondering why life keeps echoing the same lesson, why you feel stuck in repetition, even though you're working on yourself, look there, not in what you consciously choose, but in what you unconsciously cling to. Ask yourself, what emotion feels most familiar? What experience do I expect even when I say I want something else? What part of me still finds comfort in discomfort? Not because I enjoy it, but because I know how to survive it. That's the starting point of rebirth. Not adding more light, but noticing the shadows that you've mistaken for home. Because you can't build a new reality if you're still using the emotional architecture of the old one. This is where quantum change begins. When you realize that freedom doesn't just mean stepping into the new, it means letting go of the parts of you that only knew how to live inside the pain. So let's talk about the layer most people skip. Not because it's hidden, but because it's uncomfortable. Because the truth is, you can't enter a new timeline while carrying the emotional codes of your old identity. You can't become the version of you who's finally at peace. If your nervous system is still calibrated to chaos, you can't embody freedom if your body still associates calm with danger. And this isn't something your conscious mind gets to override. This is biology. This is the muscle memory of emotion. And if you've lived years expecting disappointment or betrayal or abandonment, then those feelings become familiar. They become safe. So when something new arrives, when love feels soft, when opportunity feels aligned, when peace starts to settle in your cells, something in you tightens. Not because it's wrong, but because it's unknown. And here's the glitch most people run into. They try to use the mind to override what only the body can release. They say, I'm ready for love, but flinch when someone sees them deeply. They say they want abundance, but feel guilt the moment it arrives. They say they're done with the past, but still spiral when an old trigger resurfaces. Because healing doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop obeying the old instructions. The instructions that said you had to be small to be safe, that you had to dim yourself to be accepted. That joy only came after suffering. You don't need to force your way into a new life. You need to stop recycling the one that no longer fits. And this begins with awareness, not just of your thoughts, but of your default responses. That moment you shrink back, even when no one's judging. That way, you deflect compliments or push love away without realizing that tension in your stomach when things go well and you wait for it to collapse. Those are your codes, that's your blueprint. And if you don't update the pattern, the field will continue reflecting it with painful accuracy. Because the field is exact, it mirrors not your potential, but your programming. So ask yourself right now, what emotional states have I normalized that no longer match the life I say I want? Do I feel safer in conflict than in connection? More familiar with failure than with growth? More anchored in guilt than in joy? That's where the work begins. Not in fixing, but in releasing. Releasing the identity that was built on surviving and choosing the one aligned with thriving. It sounds simple, but this is deep recalibration. This is cellular decluttering. And sometimes it'll feel like grieving a version of you that once kept you alive, but now keeps you small. Let that version rest. Let those codes fade, and remind your body every day, we are safe now. Not because nothing bad will ever happen, but because you're no longer abandoning yourself to stay alive, and from that place of truth, everything begins to shift. Rebirth sounds beautiful until it starts happening to you. Until everything you thought defined you begins to dissolve, until your stories stop working, until your habits stop feeling like home, until you look in the mirror and feel like a stranger to yourself. And this is the part most people run from. Not because they're weak, but because no one told them that awakening often feels like breaking. That before the breakthrough, there's an unraveling, an emotional detox, an ego purge, a spiritual disorientation that makes you question everything. Because you're not just changing your mindset, you're losing your identity. The one that was built in survival, the one that learned how to belong by shrinking, the one that learned how to feel worthy by overgiving, the one that mistook trauma for personality, and now that version is dissolving. It doesn't happen in a flash of light. It happens in quiet moments, when you stop laughing at jokes that hurt your soul, when you stop chasing what never loved you back, when you stop needing external proof to feel enough. That's when the death begins, and the death is necessary because you can't carry the old you into a new frequency, not because the universe won't let you, but because it literally won't match. You'll walk into rooms that used to feel right and suddenly feel out of place. You'll hear your old thoughts and realize they're not yours anymore. You'll see your own reflection and feel both terrified and free. This is the rebirth, but it doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It whispers through discomfort. It pulls you into stillness. It strips away everything that made you feel certain so that you can finally discover what's real. And what's real isn't found in your past. It's not found in your roles or your titles or your followers or your plans. It's found in the quiet truth underneath all the noise. The truth that you were never broken, just buried, under conditioning, under patterns, under stories that were passed down and never questioned. And when those begin to fade, so do the illusions that kept you small. That's what makes this moment powerful. Not that you've arrived, but that you've surrendered. Because surrender is the doorway to the unknown. And the unknown is where the new identity is born. Not one based on proving or pleasing or pretending, but one that simply is. One that doesn't hustle for love, that doesn't chase validation, that doesn't shrink when seen. It's subtle at first. You'll feel it in how you breathe, how you respond instead of react, how you trust instead of control, how you soften instead of defend. That's the frequency of the rebirth, and when you hold it long enough, the field begins to mirror it. People shift, opportunities emerge, synchronicities align. Not because you forced anything, but because you finally stopped resisting who you really are. And who you really are has been waiting beneath the rubble of your old self. Not broken, just hidden, not lost, just quiet, not gone, just rebirthing, right now in this moment. A new timeline isn't something you chase, it's something you match. It's not out there waiting for you to find it. It's already here, sitting quietly beside the version of you who stopped resisting. But here's what most people miss. You don't shift timelines by doing more. You shift them by being different. By becoming the signal that new reality responds to. That means becoming the person who already feels safe receiving it, already believes they're worthy of keeping it, already lives as if it's done, not pretending, not faking it, but embodying it in the way you speak to yourself when no one's listening, in how you respond to disappointment, in how you show up when nothing is certain. That's the frequency that attracts timelines. Not the words you script in a journal, but the energy you carry in a silent room. Think about the version of you who already lives in that new reality. Not what they wear, not what car they drive, but how they breathe, how they trust, how they recover when life wobbles. Because that's who you need to become now before the timeline arrives. Not after. That's the paradox. The shift doesn't happen when the thing comes. It happens when you become the version of you who doesn't need it to feel whole. That's when it flows in, because your nervous system no longer sees it as a threat. You're not holding desire from a place of lack. You're not manifesting to fix yourself. You're expressing who you already are, without apology, without fear. That's what makes you magnetic. And this magnetism isn't about being louder or brighter. It's about being clear. Clear in your boundaries. Clear in your self-trust. Clear in what you no longer tolerate. Because every time you say no to an old pattern, you say yes to a new timeline. Every time you pause instead of reacting. Every time you choose stillness over panic. Every time you feel the impulse to shrink and you breathe instead. That's a vote. That's a shift. That's you becoming magnetic in real time. It's subtle but powerful. You'll start noticing people treating you differently, not because they've changed, but because your field has. You'll watch opportunities flow in that once felt out of reach, not because you forced them, but because you no longer block them with doubt. This is the energy of the shift. Calm, steady, rooted. Not desperate for proof, but anchored in truth. It doesn't mean you never wobble. It means you know how to return back to your center, back to your breath, back to your knowing. And from that place, reality adjusts. The field doesn't respond to urgency. It responds to coherence. So create inner coherence in how you think, in how you feel, in how you act. Let them all speak the same language, because when your signal is clean, your timeline is clear, and what once felt impossible becomes inevitable. Not because you forced it, but because you aligned with it. And alignment doesn't shout, it hums, it whispers, it radiates, and the universe can't help but echo it back. So now the question isn't, how do I get there? It's, who do I become here? Because the truth is, the version of you who already lives that life you imagine, they're not somewhere far away. They're quietly waiting in the stillness beneath your doubt, in the pause between your thoughts, in the breath. You haven't fully exhaled yet. You don't have to chase them. You only have to remember. Remember what it feels like to trust yourself again. To move, not from urgency, but from clarity. To no longer beg life to prove your worth, but to embody it like gravity, unshakable, unseen, and always pulling things into alignment. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being present with your emotions, with your energy, with your truth. Because you don't magnetize from the mask, you magnetize from the root, from that deep electric knowing within you that says, I don't need it to feel whole, I already am. And that's what the field listens to. Not your effort, not your scripting, not your hustle, disguised as healing, but your coherence. So if today felt messy, if your signal got shaky, if your inner voice cracked under pressure, good. That means you're paying attention. That means you're in it, becoming it, shifting. Because alignment isn't loud, it doesn't scream, it doesn't demand, it hums, it settles, it softens your nervous system until your whole field becomes a yes. So take a breath, not to escape, but to return. Back to the version of you who was never missing, only waiting for you to come home. That's where the shift lives. That's when reality bends. That's when the impossible becomes obvious, and the timeline you were chasing chases you back.